Hello. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast. I appreciate that all of you are watching and listening here to our weekly chats. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, your host, and as a career and life coach for women, my mission is to create resources that help women navigate career and life challenges more easily, and so they know they're not alone. With each weekly inspiring conversation, we intend to help women worldwide become more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and indeed in their lives. So, if something strikes a chord while you're watching or listening, check out the information below, the links to connect with my guest and me. So you might notice that we've got a little trend going here in the early part of the season because cultivating leadership qualities and skills are fundamental to our careers and life success. Whether you're stepping into a leadership role within a company, division, a team, or your family, or even yourself, developing those hard and soft skills is essential. So, today we're going to unwind the narrative that leadership is difficult and pull back the curtain to reveal what it takes to be an exceptional leader. My guest is Michelle Thompson. She's a registered nurse turned leadership development coach and consultant. Michelle helps organizations and their leaders prioritize their people, curate a culture of trust and belonging, and improve their customer experience, thereby creating a workplace that people never want to leave. Now, that sounds like a culture that most of my clients would jump to join. So, we call this episode Leadership is an Exchange of Energy. Hello, Michelle.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today.
Welcome. It is a pleasure. I am so
Thank
glad to
you.
have this conversation with you today.
Thank
And you're
you.
coming to us from cold country. You're up in Vancouver, aren't you?
Yes, I'm coming from British Columbia, specifically West Vancouver. And we've had snow the last few days and rain this morning. So it's washed most of it away. But I'm looking at the mountains and it's still, there's a lot of dusting of snow up there. So it's quite pretty this morning.
That's lovely. All
Yeah.
right. So I want to just jump right in, if you don't mind.
Hmm.
Would you tell us, Michelle, a little bit about your career, how it started, and how you became a leadership consultant?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I have the gift of gab, so please stop me. But I feel fortunate in saying that my nursing career goes as far back as I can remember. My mother raised me as a single parent. I'm an only child, and she was a lab technician in our local hospital when I was growing up. And so the rules were a little different in the 70s. And if I finished my homework on time, my grandmother would often drop me off at the hospital after school if my mom was working a little bit of a longer shift. And if I finished my homework, she would bring me up to the maternal newborn unit, and her friends were nurses, and so there was times when I was allowed to hold the babies and to watch nurses care for these babies, and it was just I really just thought they were angels on earth, and I wanted to be just like them. That was I was about 7 or 8. I didn't realize how hard it is to become a nurse. So, of course, when I graduated high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and went right into nursing school. And sadly, I hated every moment of it. And I share that part of my story because I love nursing and I love being a nurse. I just didn't love the theory of it. I'm very practical and hands on. So I almost quit. And about 3 weeks before, my mother looked at me like she still does. I'm going to be 52 this year, and anyone who knows, when your mother looks at you a certain way, she wins every time. And she said to me, "You're not quitting. Get out of bed, and you're going to school, and you're finishing." And thank heavens for her for doing that. And so I started nursing, and I moved away from home almost right after I graduated, and I started working in a variety of different environments. Long-term care has always been a part of my career. I was a end-of-life palliative care nurse for a few years. And I think that when I moved from where I was residing at that time out to where I'm residing now in the province of British Columbia, it was to take one of my first more senior leadership roles in the to manage a long-term care home. And it was for a very reputable company, and I had no reason to believe that the situation would be anything less than wonderful. And only a few months after I started the position and moved cross country, I could feel a real subtle shift start to occur in the attitudes of the employees that were working there. And I came to work one day and I was told by our administrative assistant that licensing was coming in to do an investigation, which is not unusual here in our province. They just want to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But I came to learn they were coming to investigate a complaint from one of our staff that I had asked them to cover up the death of a resident. And it was in that moment that I panicked. I proverbially felt the blood drain from my body. And it's not because I knew that to be true. It's because I knew it wasn't true. And I wasn't sure if I would have the support of the senior leaders who I was reporting to because I'd only been working there for a short period of time. And so fast forward 2 days of an investigation, and they clearly identified that I had not done what I was, accused of being said that I had done. And when asked, the nurse said, "Well, we thought that if we could get her fired, everything would go back to the way that it was." And it was really in that moment that I realized that I was working in a dysfunctional environment that I had no idea how to manage and that I had been set up for failure. Now, not intentionally, but I think the employer that I had at that time is not unlike a lot of other employers where we just kind of think that we'll figure the leadership part of it out. And I was hired because I was hired based on the fact that I was able to do the core competencies and the core functions of my job. I wasn't hired based on the fact that I had a lot of leadership experience. And I think that, again, I was just expected that I would figure that piece out. And so I knew I had two choices. I could either quit my job and go find another one, which would have been fairly easy for me to do, knowing that probably I would run into a similar situation at some point in my career, or I could dig my heels in and try to figure out a solution. And I say that it's in part because I'm a Leo and I'm incredibly stubborn and I'm impatient. But also, I had the good fortune of having a few really close mentors that I knew had my back within that organization that sort of helped me in those early stages to really start to do a deep dive into how to lead from a place where the culture is really broken and there's a lack of trust. And so that's really just kind of led me on a 25-year journey of just continuing to learn and iterate and evolve and look at the research of other people and then really trying to bring all of that together to create my own model and approach of leadership, but one that I can share with other people that really brings it down to the most simplistic form so that we really do understand that I think leadership has been made to be more complicated than it really is. And I truly believe that, the title of today's show is that leadership truly is an exchange of energy. The energy that I approach, that I bring in a room, that I share, the way I hold space for people, the safe container that I create for people is really about the energy that I choose to bring into that. And that will be matched, or I can choose to elevate it. So that's where we are today.
That's a wonderful story.
Thank you.
You and I have something in common that I'm not sure we've shared yet. My mom was a nurse as well. So I have a soft spot in my heart for the work that you
Yeah.
and your mom and nurses do.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing all that you've done and for taking it to the level that you have, right? Identifying where there are problems. So let's dig in for a moment. There are every time I go on LinkedIn, I see somebody else's definition of leadership. So let's have a little dictionary moment with you, and let's talk about what leadership means to you and kind of set a stage for this conversation.
Sure. I mean, for me, leadership really is very simple. I believe that as a leader, I have two primary responsibilities. It's to create a psychologically safe work environment and to create a space where I am trusted. And that really boils down to understanding how we're hardwired to connect as humans, how we're more alike than we are different. And that by being able to instill trust, there's a few kind of core things that I can do that will speed up that process, but also let people know that I'm coming from a place of core values. And so I really believe that all exceptional leaders have to really be in tune and understand what their core values are so that you know that you're always practicing from a place of keeping those intact, that those are become your north star. And what I've learned in my experience is that when you become very clear with your core values as a leader, it makes really difficult decisions often far less difficult because you're not kind of questioning yourself and you're not questioning your integrity and why you're making certain decisions. You know it's because it's driving you based on those core values. So for me, it's quite simple.
Yeah, and I'd like to suggest that it's not just as a leader, but everyone who
Absolutely.
gets firmly grounded in what they believe and what they value most, and they come from that place that makes everyone's decisions easier. It's one of the principles I teach as well. So, share with us how you work to create the trust that you speak about and how that creates this kind of zone of safety and inclusion for your clients.
Yeah, so I always say that I'm not super smart. I'm quite intelligent, but the work that I do is really founded on a lot of evidence-based research from other people over the years. For me, because I'm a nurse, I am very much in it becoming evidence-based. I want to make sure that the information that I'm sharing with people as far as a leadership approach or what has worked for me over the years is coming from a place of tried and true. So I've done it myself and I've seen the results, but also that I know that there's evidence to support that. And so over the years, I've kind of narrowed it down to a few action items that people can do every day that will quickly, very quickly move the needle in your workplace. And so the first one for me, and this seems so obvious, and yet I think that because we get so busy with the day to day things, this can become very difficult. And I really appreciate, Maria, your comment saying that, these are things that we can also incorporate in our personal lives. It doesn't have to just happen in the workplace. So the first one is to get out and to be seen. So I always say to people, get out of your office every day and to be seen. People can't trust someone who they don't know, who they don't understand, who they don't see how you react. It's also a really good barometer check for us as individuals that if I walk in a room and people look horrified to see me, there's potentially a good chance that I'm doing some things wrong. I would like to think that when I walk in a room, people look excited to see me, not just because I have a charismatic personality, but because they see me as someone who's coming to add support, to be a source of guidance or information if they need it. Someone who's there to say, "Great job, thank you so much for your contribution. Let's figure this problem out together." So that's the first one, is just to get out and be seen. And that's going to look different for everybody. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. It can be 5 or 10 minutes, but to make sure that you're always engaging with people that, are different. It's not always the same groups of people. So the next one, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking how this would create this people focused culture that you talk about.
Hmm. Yeah,
Just getting out and being seen, because you're so right. When people don't get to know you, there's no way they can trust you,
no,
right? And
no.
it's not that they all have to like you, but they have to respect, right?
Yeah,
That you're coming from this place of how can I help?
yeah. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I say in terms of helping organizations to create a really positive culture is to start with that very question of a how can I help mindset. So, I think the second thing is to kind of maintain a growth mindset. So, always looking for opportunities, and this is also, you can say a growth mindset, also looking at a strength-based perspective. What are people bringing to the workplace that's an asset, as opposed to always looking at what could I do better? What don't I do very well? Where can I improve? It's the way that people are showing up with the positive aspects of what they're bringing to the work. This is a big one for me, and this is to ask questions and get really curious. I think sometimes we can ask, kind of very high level questions, and those definitely are important. But there's also really deeper questions that we can ask. So when you're getting out and you're getting out of your office to talk with people, to ask the questions. Instead, I used to ask questions like, "How's your day?" And I would always get fine, but yet the face wasn't really matching the words that were coming out of their mouth. And so I had to really learn over the years to ask deeper questions was, "Tell me what the most difficult part of your day was today. Tell me
Ooh,
what went really, really well. What's something that you need that I can help with to do your job better?" It's really coming from a place of curiosity. It has nothing to do with me. It's how I can support our employees as individuals to come to work to do a better job. We know that the majority of people come to work to do well, but people who don't often feel safe or don't feel that they're trusted don't behave well in the workplace.
right.
Yeah.
Asking questions like that, I love that. I love that you did that. Thank you for those examples
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're so right. We often ask, so how are you doing? And we don't really want to know, right? But when
Yeah.
you ask a deeper question like that, it really gives people pause. And my impression would be if someone were to ask that of me, my impression would be that they really want to know. It's not just a how you doing today? Fine. They really want to know whatever it is the question
Yeah.
was. So, I love what are you struggling with today and how can I help?
And I think that when you show up with that level of humility and vulnerability, it's not that it's required as a leader, but when people see that you voluntarily do that, in their mind they're thinking, "Wow, that was probably really difficult for her to ask a question where the response might not be something she can fix or something she doesn't want to hear. Maybe it's not going to be positive." And I think that again, it's when you understand the inner workings of how we are hardwired to connect, then it makes it easier as a leader to really ask and lean into some of those questions. I also think that when you ask those questions more frequently, it creates a safer space for people to speak their truth. When I first started asking questions like, "How was your day?" and I would get fine, when I started asking people, I said, "Well, your face doesn't actually look like it's fine. So why are you telling me it's fine?" And they're like, "Well, because I don't know why you're asking." And I think that sometimes people would be afraid to say what they were really thinking because they
Right.
didn't know what the consequence of those comments would be.
Right.
And so
Because
it
they
can
didn't feel
often
safe.
exactly, it can be really helpful as a leader to, this is Stephen Covey, is to state your intention. I'm really interested in understanding what I can help, what I can help, how I can help, and how I can make your day easier, how I can provide you the resources so that you can do the incredible work you do easier. So tell me some things that maybe I can support you with that would be quick wins for us together. Now that just takes that level sort of the playing field. It takes the scary part out of the conversation because now people know exactly why you're asking the question.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. It occurs to me that we're talking about leadership and leaders and what leaders can do, but what you're talking about, the tips that you're sharing with us are good ones in everyday life with families, with personal leadership. So, I want those who are listening to just think about this, not just in terms of if you are in a leadership role or aspire to be one, what can you do to make it better? But think about how Michelle's uh, strategies here can help you just in everyday life.
Well, and I so appreciate that, Maria, because the last three that I have really are ones that I use, I would argue, probably more in my personal life than I do in my work
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. All
And
right. Let's
so,
get to
really
those.
quickly, those last three ones are recognizing that the words that you use matter.
Mm,
So when you're cognizant of what is coming out of your mouth and how you're saying those words, it can really shape and frame a conversation very differently with people. And so those are things like using the words but, should, and try.
mm,
Sometimes when we use those words, they're often intended just to be filler words in our English language. I like this, but I can also enjoy that. And I think that when you're trying to give someone a compliment, I like the dress you're wearing, but I really liked the one you wore yesterday.
mhm.
It kind of negates the positive aspect of the first part of that sentence. And so I usually tell people just take out the word but and put a period. I really liked the dress you were wearing yesterday, and I really enjoy the one you have on today. So it's really being mindful about the words we use. And then also having daily kindness in your in your actions. So
Mm,
I always tell people that I help to support through leadership is there's a big difference between being nice and being kind in
yeah.
both work and our personal life. And the way I differentiate it, I try to be simple about this, is that often when we're being nice, it's that idea of being polite or that we're doing something because we want people to like us or to not be angry with us. Whereas kindness acknowledges that I might have to have a difficult conversation with you. And my core values are leading me to say that I'm not in alignment if I don't say anything. But I know that I can do this in a way that's respectful and that we can get through a difficult conversation and still have respect for each other at the end of that conversation. So it's having that inner knowing of being able to do that. I think it's listening. We have 2 ears and one mouth, I've been told by a lot of people for a reason. So we try to listen twice as hard as we speak. And the last one I would say is stop playing the if only game. And this is one that, I talk a good game and I still catch myself doing every once in a while. But it's the if only I had more time. If only, so many people weren't emailing me every day. If only I didn't have so many reports. Or if only my children could learn how to fill the dishwasher on their own. Or if only I had someone to cook meals. I think that when we get caught up in this if only game, it really creates this space of scarcity where we're always sort of chasing after the eight ball. And then everything we do is with this erratic energy of just trying to cross one more thing off our proverbial to do list, as opposed to coming to it with real intention. So, I try to get people to stop thinking about the if only game and say, it's okay. If today I don't load the dishwasher, it's okay. If today my kids get Kraft dinner 3 times this week, that's okay. It's a small point of time. And I think that sometimes we're not so good at giving ourselves the same level of grace that we're willing to give other people.
Oh, that's that you just entered into
Mhm.
such a powerful statement. You know, I love these three things. Choosing our words carefully, changing but to and works almost every time. I love that. And then being kind, truly being kind, like heartfelt kind. And then the if only game, I play that. I do. I
Yeah.
was thinking, I said it the other night, if only I had a wife,
Yeah.
then my job would be a lot easier. I've said that to my husband. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times.
Yeah.
Uh, but we do play that,
Hmm.
and and it sets us up to feel like we don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
or that we are not enough.
Yeah.
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 That those are such value, so much value that you've shared with us so already, Michelle. And I know that you have created something called the person centered leadership, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started Curious Consulting in 2017, 18, and it was really intended to always be kind of a, I hate to use these words, but like a side hustle or a side gig, um, because I never really thought myself anything other than working as a clinical provider, a nurse. And I was asked to I was asked to be taken on by a client who I'd worked very closely with, and they wanted me to do some curriculum creation and then deliver curriculum for them. And it was really during that process that I love to teach, and I love what I learned from students and participants when I've had that opportunity to teach and to facilitate. And it was really through that process that I realized that I didn't love all aspects of that, even though I was the one that created the curriculum. But I really loved the idea of being able to share the knowledge that I had kind of curated over the years and kind of putting it in one place. And so I created what's called the person centered leadership approach. And person is an acronym. And so, what that stands for is the P is personal connections, the E is emotional intelligence, the R is respectful communication, S is self care, O is ongoing learning, and then the N is leaving no one behind. And so, really, those are the core pieces that I feel that is part of the leadership model that I follow and that I recognize and that I resonate with the most have those kind of core pieces. And then the pieces, the daily actions that I've just shared with you are sort of sprinkled in throughout all of those areas in terms of how we action certain things. So I created, it was originally an 8-week program that I kind of beta tested 2 years ago with some nurses, and it was well received. And it was extended to 14 weeks because people really felt that in between the self-directed modules and then going live once a week that they needed that extra week to kind of go back and go away and apply what they were learning and then come back and have some group learning opportunities to share what went well for them and where they were still challenged before kind of moving on to the next area. So yeah, it's a 14-week online leadership program.
I love what the acronym stands for. There are so many, wonderful nuggets in that. And I'm happy to hear that self-care is one of them because that's one thing that I think a lot of the women that I work with, that's probably the last thing they think of, unfortunately, is how to make sure that they are well so that they can show up at their best. So I'm really glad to hear that that's part of it.
Yeah, thank you. I've been teaching self-care now for a little over, well, probably about a year and a half now. And it was something that I actually found myself doing in it. And it started off to present at a conference a year and a half ago for a local provider here that I work very closely with. And I respect them so much and the team they have. And so I presented a topic on self-care is not selfish, knowing very well that it's a very kitschy title, but I know that people understand that because to your point, Maria, that I think a lot of times women in particular, we get so busy with work and life. And then when we think about self care, it just becomes one more thing that we're trying to fit into our routine. And the idea of that often is that it's an either or. We have to sacrifice something to fit that in. And, I think the biggest tip that I can give anyone, if you're just trying to kind of dip your toe into the water of self care, is to try everything because the journaling and the meditation and all the things that we typically associate with self care aren't going to work for everybody.
Right.
To recognize that self care is any activity that quiets your central nervous system. So that can be a cup of tea and reading a page or two of a book. And I think the other thing really is just that it doesn't have to be something that's really complicated in that you have to carve out time for it.
Right.
So again, I think that habit stacking can be a wonderful thing for people. When I figured out how to have a morning routine and a bedtime routine, that was a real game changer for me
Yeah.
because now most of my self-care occurs as part of my morning and my bedtime routine. And those are just building in things that I already had into my schedule. I'm just approaching things sometimes for a different perspective. So this morning when I was brushing my teeth, I was thinking about, you and the time we were going to have together and how I would show up and the type of energy that I wanted to bring to this call, rather than what I would have done before is maybe worried about it or just been thinking about, oh, I'm 10 minutes late and I got to get out the door. I'm much more intentional now about how I kind of set my day.
I love that. I think that's so important. I established a morning routine to begin with several years ago. You're right; it's a game changer. And then the evening routine, what I added later, and it set me up really well for setting intentions as I go to sleep, and then starting my morning routine by setting intentions when I awake. So it's really real. So I suspect these are some of your secrets, right? For what you do for your own personal and leadership development. Is that right?
It is. I think it was about a year ago. Maybe I read the 5 a.m. book
Yep.
club,
Yep.
and so honestly, I tell people you don't have to get up at 5 a.m. to
No.
follow the principles of that book. I'm up at 5:15 most mornings, so it sort of aligns with just my natural sleep wake cycle. But what I take from that is really three components of that. Is that, and I mean, go get the book because it's a great book. But the three pieces that I take away from that is that when I wake up in the morning, I don't pick up my phone. I used to, and I would catch myself scrolling or going through emails,
Yep.
and I would already feel sort of depleted before I even got out of bed in the morning. I don't do that. I wake up now and I snuggle with my dog, who's usually on the floor beside our bed, for a few moments. And I get up and I go downstairs to what I call our home gym, which is our garage. And I get on my treadmill and either walk or run for 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes I'll watch a video. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just think. I'm just alone with myself and my thoughts. And then I will generally also do some sort of meditation. I really like to meditate in the morning. So I'll do sometimes just 15 or 20 minutes of a quick meditation. In the mornings, it's still dark here. So I'll turn on our fireplace in our front living room and sit in front of the fire for 15 or 20 minutes and just sort of get lost in my thoughts or journal. And I find that just such a relaxing way to start my morning. And then the last piece is that I will do something educational, something to stimulate my brain. So sometimes it's listening to a podcast while I'm getting ready in the morning. It doesn't have to be really difficult and complicated. It's really just finding out what works for you. And it took me a long time to figure out what I'd be willing to commit to every day and continue to do on a regular basis. And I don't do it every day. And I think that's the other piece, is to say that if you don't feel like doing one or all of those pieces, it's not failure. It's listening to your body. And that's the big thing I learned. And I tell everybody is that our bodies are really great at telling us what it needs. We are often just not good listeners. So some mornings I wake up and I say, what do I need today? And it's not to get up and run on my treadmill, even though I know that will make me feel better and it's good for my health. It's that I want to lay in bed for a little bit longer and I want to just, think about things or ruminate on something, or maybe I just want to journal in my cozy bed. So sometimes it's just really about asking yourself, what is it that I need right now?
And you're so right about that. We are not necessarily good listeners. I find one of the things that I add to my morning routine is drinking water, because it's something that I can. I chug a lug of, like 3 8-ounce glasses of water every morning and to get started. And now I realize if I don't do that in the morning, I feel parched. I really feel thirsty. And it's a great way to get your body, you just to hydrate your body and get started. So I love that you gave everyone permission to figure out what works best for you and do that, but don't give yourself the grace that if you wake up one morning and sleeping in, that happened to me this morning. I just needed to sleep in a little longer. So I did. So some of the things that I normally do in the morning, I didn't do.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You just have to give yourself grace. I always drink the water no matter what.
And it seems so obvious. I say to people, if you had a close friend or a family member who was telling you that they were really tired, would you say, "Oh, just get up, you're being lazy and get on with it?" We would likely not use that type of language with someone that we care
Right.
deeply for or close to us. And yet it's okay. We often think it's okay for us to use that same language with ourselves.
Yeah.
So, this is a space where, again, it's an everyday practice. It's not something that I feel you ever really master, because some days our brains are just in different places. But I think that it's the awareness of when it's happening so that you can pull yourself back from that and say, no, that's not the language that I'm going to use with myself today, so that we can start to kind of rewire some of that thinking. And
Right.
that's part of the leadership that I teach, is really understanding that the way that we see the world based on our lived experiences creates the space and the container that we hold for other people, whether they're like us or very different from us, in terms of how then people will feel that they are part of a community, that they belong, and that they're safe.
And if we walk that talk, we are teaching people how to treat us as well. So they're
Absolutely.
seeing us treat them in a certain way and treat ourselves in a certain way, and that teaches them how we want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
important too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved this conversation, Michelle. I think that you have shared so many tips and strategies already, but I hope you've saved a few, because at the end of every conversation I have on this podcast with my guest, I ask them to share some practical tips that people can take away. And some of them may be some that you've already shared and you want to reiterate. What's your first one?
I think that for me, when I think of myself in a leadership role, again, personal, professional, because we're really leaders in all areas of our life, is I kind of go back to what gives me purpose, what helps me feel connected to not only myself, but also those that I'm supporting or those that I'm helping to lead. And I think that for me, it kind of comes down to like 5 focus areas that I look at. And so the first one for me, and there will be a little bit of overlap, is really around kind of the culture. So this is really more around shared values. So when I am speaking to people, again, personal or professionally, I try to find, even where we're very different, where we come from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, where are the commonalities? Where do we share, thoughts and views that are similar? Because I often find we're more alike than we are different. Our brains are just often programmed to see the things that are different, because that's that fight or flight response that is just built into our DNA that would have kept us from being eaten, billions of years ago. We don't really need that level of protection in today's world, but it's still there. So to know that your brain is hardwired to kind of go to that place of negativity, and that's okay, that doesn't make you a bad person. But when you know that, you can reframe your way of thinking to say, where am I more alike, in more alignment with this person than I am different? It doesn't mean you have to leave the conversation thinking that you have to like that person. I think there's a level of respect and understanding that it's okay if you don't see things exactly the same way. I think the Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's like finding that common ground,
Yeah,
right?
really. Yeah.
And that just kind of levels the playing field, doesn't it?
It does. And because I think, and I found myself doing this often in the early stages of my leadership development, was feeling like when I would get into a conversation with someone who had a different perspective than mine, it wasn't that I felt that I had to strong arm them into kind of coming over to my side and changing their mind because I was right and they were wrong. But it was this idea of having to defend my beliefs and why I felt, the way that I felt. And I think that with age comes wisdom, but also with experience, I've learned that I'm not for everybody, and I'm not here to have everybody like me. That's
Right.
not part of the equation for me. There are going to be some people that resonate with me, and there are going to be other people that say, no, thank you. And that's okay. But it's really about then still being able to engage in a respectful conversation with someone who has very different perspectives than mine, and being able to come out of that and say, I still don't agree with them. And maybe in private, I'm thinking, I can't get on board with that way of thinking. But I have a different level of respect because I was able to put myself in a situation to hear their perspective so that I could then think, does any part of what I think need to change? Do I need to
Mhm.
rethink or reframe anything that I'm currently kind of sitting in? So, I think that there's a lot of learning opportunity there.
And,
I think,
I think listening to understand is a big
mm,
part of that.
yeah,
But coming away when you don't agree, no matter, how clearly they conveyed their thoughts and you did the same, you can leave that discussion agreeing to disagree, and that's
yeah,
okay. That's what makes the world go
absolutely.
round, right?
And it's great practice to learn how to cultivate your language around
Right.
having difficult conversations with people.
Yeah.
Like I think it's really great practice as a leader to put yourself in those situations where there's a lot of self-awareness that's required during those moments, and mindful thinking and staying present in the moment and not waiting for that little moment where you can have a voice and jump in. It's really actively listening through that process to kind of come up with
Right.
new ways of thinking. I think the other thing
Not
for me that
feeling and not feeling defensive.
absolutely, that's key. That Thank
Yeah.
you for that.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that's really important for me is asking myself specifically in the work space is, what is the experience as a leader that I want for the people that I help to lead or support to do the good work that they do?
Mm.
And so it can really be three simple questions. And when I went through that experience that I spoke about earlier, after that experience, I thought, I don't know how to fix this, because it was very much a, we're all in this, we're not in this together. It was each person for themselves, and there was no trust. So I thought, I don't know how to fix this. And so I actually met with every single person in that organization, and I said to them, what is the experience that you want when you come to work? And what is the experience you're currently having when you come to work? And then I had to ask myself, what is the experience that I want people in our organization to have? And then you can do kind of like a gap analysis. So
Right.
where are there like things, and where are there some gaps, and where can we improve? And then you get everybody on board to say, I need help. This isn't my job to do this. This is everybody's responsibility. I need your help to move the needle on this and get people engaged. Uh,
And then teaching them, kind of the hmm, how to get grounded on their own values, right? And come from that place.
Yeah, one of the neat exercises that I've done before where there's been a real lack of trust is to reverse engineer that. So what I will have people do, and I spoke about this recently in a presentation I gave, and I encourage people to do this in the workplace with your coworkers, is get a group of people together and talk about, when you feel overwhelmed or stressed at work, what behavior does, like, what would that look like in terms of your behavior? Do you put your hands over your head? Do you raise your voice? Do you cry? Maybe some people swear inappropriately, or they'll storm away. And it's really important that you can share that information in a way that's not going to be used, against you,
Yeah.
because the next time you feel overwhelmed or stressed at work, whoever is working with you and they see that behavior, they can say to you, hey, Maria, I remember when we had that meeting and you told me that when you feel overwhelmed at work, you start to cry. And I've seen you look really upset this morning, and I think maybe you're there. Why don't you go take 10 minutes and go take a break? I've got your back. It's okay. When you're ready, come back and we'll figure it out.
I love that.
And I
I
think
love
that
that.
when you can do that, it makes this instant connection of trust. It makes people feel validated and seen. Somebody
and
sees
heard.
I'm struggling right now.
Yeah.
And that is an instant connection. But also, what that also does is it lets somebody know that it's a kind of, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back.
Yeah.
I know that now I have someone that's in my corner. So, I think that it's a really quick way to try to create trust in an environment with people where trust is really lacking, and it's such a simple exercise to do, that will really kind of demonstrate to people, like, I see you right now. I can see that you're struggling, and
Right.
I say to people, it's also about helping to create a space where it's okay to not be okay at
Yeah.
work. I
Yeah.
think sometimes we get caught up in this language of saying we want to show up as the best version of ourselves and we want to create spaces where people thrive. And that's true. And I want those things. But I also want to create a space where if I'm showing up to work at 80% and that's the best version of myself today, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Because I'm still going to come to work and I'm still going to have a lot to offer and I'm going to be productive and I'm still going to have a lot of things that I can do and offer. It's also okay if I wake up this morning and I say, not today, I just can't get out of bed, that I can do that. And that I'm not going to have judgment from colleagues or coworkers or a manager the next time I come to work to say, hey, thanks for not showing up last week. We had to work short. And because of you, we all had to work twice as hard.
Yeah. But it's all about uh, making sure, creating the environment where people can voice their feelings in that exercise that you just described, for instance, be heard and know that without judgment, you said, and I love that you made that point. When something that is less than, right? Calling in sick because they just couldn't do it today, or coming in at 80%, all of the things you just described, it takes having conversation and actively listening, hearing, and then responding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're
This,
asking those questions of people, when you're getting out and you're getting to know people, you're not often just asking questions about work. You get to know their family members and their children and the names of their children. And I remember when I worked in one organization, I we had an employee who was a single mom with a special needs child that had significant challenges. And when she started having performance issues at work and she was, there was some absenteeism issues, I knew right away what the problem was. And so I was able to kind of bring her in a really, I think, in a really humble way to say, hey, listen, how's it going at home? I know this isn't the behavior that we normally see from you. So I don't want to make any assumptions, but I just want to check in and make sure you're okay. And, she started to cry in my office. And when I asked her where the tears were coming from, she said, it's just because I know that you're not asking me because I'm going to get in trouble. And so that doesn't mean that that person gets to show up late to work every day,
right.
but it allows you to start those difficult conversations from a place of, I see you. I know you're a good person and right now you're struggling. So how can I help? And
Yeah.
that really goes back to the very first few seconds when we
Right.
started,
Right.
today talking today, is creating an environment where you're asking the question, how can I help?
Yeah. Michelle, we could talk about this. I say this to so many of my guests because I love these conversations and we could go on forever. I love all that you have shared with us, and thank you for all of the examples and all of the tips and techniques you've shared with us to get better at our own personal leadership and the leadership that we can demonstrate if we are in a role to lead others. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you
I
so much.
know.
It's really an honor to be here. I've watched so many of your episodes, so I'm
Thank you.
quite honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to get in touch with you after this. So please share with us the one best way for them to do that.
Yeah, the best place just to find me is on my website, which is on the screen right now. I'm in Canada, that's why it's a .ca. So if you do a .com, you will find a Curious Consulting, but it's not me. And that's where kind of everything is. I am on some social media platforms, but I don't frequent them often. I find as I'm getting older and I can't keep up with social media. So my website's the best place to
All
come
right.
visit me.
So that's curiousconsulting.ca.
Right.
Perfect. All right. Thank you again, Michelle. I really
You're welcome.
appreciate you being
Thank you
here.
so much.
And for those of you who have watched and listened or will see this on demand, I appreciate that you're a part of our community. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, or click a star. Let us know what you think about this conversation with Michelle. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women. Plus, as a career and life coach, I work with women all the time to help them navigate challenging times more quickly and gracefully. So, if something in this episode resonates and you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out and let's have a conversation. If you would like to reach out to Michelle or me, check out the show notes below. Plus, I invite you to continue this conversation in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap, and the link for that is below as well. So let's meet here again next Wednesday, same time, same place, for another inspiring conversation. Because I believe it's our time to thrive and that we can thrive together. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan. Till next time, helping you turn transition into triumph.